Welcome. Okay, no heckling. My name's Wayne Summers. I am the head of digital IT at Investec. So I'm going to give away my age now, but I'm a self-taught developer. I started coding in the mid-80s. Now, I don't know if any of you coded in those days. You basically had access to two computers, a ZX Spectrum and a Commodore 64. Yeah, I can see some people in the audience here know what I'm talking about. That's good. Otherwise, I'd be the only one. And the problem with those things is you never had a hard drive. So whenever you started writing code, like when you're done, you turn the computer off, all your work was lost. See, you can relate again. And the way you taught yourself in those days, there was no Google or MSDN or anything. You used to use books like this. And you can see this is a book, a book, and it's got 100 games inside of it. But the games are actually all the text of the game. So what you used to do is open it up, type basically word for word the entire game into the Commodore 64 or the ZX Spectrum, play it, and then pretend really hard that those two square shooting pixels at each other were real tanks. Okay. It lasted about 5 minutes, and you got bored, and then you'd stop and recode the whole thing in again. So that was annoying. So we figured out after a while, and I'll teach you a life hack. If you take an old cassette, like, I don't know if you know old cassettes, and there's a little square on top. And if you put sellotape on that little square on top, you can actually make a cassette tape writable, so you can record over it. So what you used to do then is code these games, put it into the cassette tape, jerry-rig it with some tape, and then now you could actually save your work. Okay, that sounds like I'm from the dinosaur age, but that's fine. I think in the mid-90s, I got to work as a developer. I worked on a mainframe in a language called Ideal Datacom, and none of you probably ever heard about this, and that's fine. It died, I think. That went on to me using COBOL, and then I got access to web technologies, and my whole career I've been basically in web and internet technologies. For most of my career, I've been a developer at a bank. Now, working as a developer, not at a bank, in financial services, corporate type environment. It's an interesting concept because you generally, if you're in a startup, everybody's techies and they sort of can relate to you. When you work in a corporate, that's a very different story. I think a lot of people think we like use our nerdy ones and we wave it and code pops up. That's sort of the idea of how people think developers work. And that comes with a challenge because when you're trying to put across new ideas or innovations, it's very hard to explain to people the value in those things. But I think it's up to us to try and articulate to people the value we can deliver with technology. In a corporate, it's a very hard challenge. When you start up, you're probably less to an extent. So I'm very excited about the possibilities we can use technology for as an opportunity in the financial service space to actually deliver value. So then probably asking yourselves, what is some weird developer from Investec doing on the stage talking at a merge conference? Because we generally, banks aren't at the forefront of innovation. And the reality is, at Investec, we believe that the biggest way to impact the economy is to actually invest in the technology sector. We heard earlier today that there's low barriers to entry, so anybody can become a dev. And it's like technology is like a force multiplier, which means the economic value you can generate with your code is much more than the value they're paying you. Doesn't mean you have to ask your boss for no more money, but you get what I mean. Like one dev can generate a lot of economic value. And with low barriers to entry, it's sort of a no-brainer. Those 2 points for me just sum this up. So this looks like one of those things you print out in black and stick it on your wall, and now you've done your contribution to society. But not really. So when we looked at this statement, we said, what does growing the SA technology sector actually mean? Like practically. You can stick this on there and like waffle around stuff. And when we looked around, a lot of the money, there's a lot of money going into technology sector in South Africa, but a lot of it was focused very much around FinTechs or startups, or I didn't feel like they were focusing on the actual root of the matter, which is the individual developer. Like it was all very financial based to an extent. And for me, growing the technology sector is actually not about that. It's actually about the individual, it's about the jockey, and it's about getting more devs to write more software. It's like that's the fundamental of it. It's not about all the other fancy stuff in the environment. So that left me with a question. How do we actually go about doing this? Because it felt very broad. So we went in a bit of a learning exercise. So we spoke to anybody in the tech ecosystem that wanted to give us the time of day. So we spoke to some startups, we spoke to Professor Barry at WITS, we spoke to code dojos, code retreats, like anybody that wanted to talk to us. We had some focus group with some devs externally. We asked our own devs, since we're a tech team, how do we go about doing it? We collected all of that information and we drew out this beautiful slide. Just to quickly run through this thing, it basically, from the left to right here, we believe that this requires a cradle-to-grave strategy. It wasn't just about making sure that you enable somebody once they have a job. It's about how do we get them from an early childhood to getting access to a computer, taking them through the education system to learn how to code, and once they're a job, how do you make them successful at their job? So this was a cradle-to-grave strategy, not just about an individual part of your life. So we broke it down to those 3 sections and we tried to plug in everything we learned. On the right, you'll see this orange bit. We thought initially, this was our hypothesis, that developers would want to have access to financial services. Maybe we can plug in, as Investec, our part in there. And then we found about this company at the bottom called OfferZen. And they were well connected into the tech community because of what they do. They had access to a lot of devs. So we said they're probably a really good bunch of people to go ask, how do we generate value for the tech community? First, we sent them an email to say, can we chat to you? They blatantly ignored us. Us being a bank, they said, sorry, not interested. And then we wore them down, I think, over time. And after a while, they said, cool, come to Cape Town. We'll have a chat with you. So I took that big A4 piece of paper there, walked in and said, I want to do this. Can you help us? So we sat, you can see us here in Cape Town, having a nice chat. Sat in their poofs as well there. This was a more civilized one. So we sat there and said, how do we go about doing this? And we had our assumptions. We said, should we invest in education? Is that the biggest lever we can pull to get devs to become better at their jobs? Or do we go and get cheap hardware? Or we had a couple of hypotheses based on all the learnings we've done up to now. It emerged at the end that basically the biggest thing we can do as a bank is actually give people access to their banking. Because banking is hard. Writing code, it's hard, but it's not as hard as being a bank. So can we take the hard parts away and actually enable devs to use that infrastructure to do cool stuff? And you heard earlier, there's a lot of opportunities we believe can be unlocked by giving you access to your banking. So based on that, we said, let's do a little experiment. So the quickest and most practical thing we can think of is just to say, can we plug programming into a card? Because it's used every day. Everybody's used to swiping your card. It's a nice easy thing to actually do. And now I'm going to explain to you how card systems work. For all the technical people, you've learned something today. So there's a point of sale and it basically sends the transaction to Investec. We process it and send the transaction back. Okay, so just humor me. I know this is really basic. So as you saw in that other picture, we actually had Lau from Root there. We had Milan, and they were all involved. And they said, they helped us put this together. So we said, can we actually say, when you swipe at the point of sale, it sends us to our card system. And before it does anything, we want to plug into these 2 hooks. One before transaction, before the money goes out of your account, and one after it goes out of your account. And then we want to run it in an AWS Lambda expression. So this, we've invited back again, and for 2 days we sort of tried to build all of this stuff out, just to make sure that we can prove how it works. So just to show you what this is an editor in Investec Online. So if you think of private banking or online banking or whatever you do, you log in there and you see all your money, there's a thing that says go to this editor. On the left-hand side, there's a simulator, so this is basically going to simulate your transaction coming from the point of sale. So you don't have to swipe your card to test it. You can just hit that run in sandbox button and it will simulate a transaction from a point in sale. On the right hand side, you should be familiar with this. This is like a code editor. So here you write all your code. So just to position when we go forward. So we said, let's create a little simple use case. So the most obvious thing is what I want to do. I want to go set up a Google Sheet. And every time I swipe my card, I want the transaction to update my Google Sheet. What that will let me do is sort of get a feel for, if I set up a budget, how much money is coming in. What I next want to do is actually tell myself every time I swipe how much money I've left against my budget so that I know, am I swiping too much money or not? And then the freaky part was, can I actually start controlling the behavior of my card based on the values of a Google Sheet? So can I start controlling my card? Okay, so step one. This is going to go into a bit like nerdy stuff. I'm going to show you code, so just humor me. So we said we're going to focus first on this after transaction. So just to explain this, so once you've swiped your card, the money goes out of your account. This is like almost a callback to that thing to say, you can now do stuff with the results of that card swipe. So we logged it to Google Sheets. And this is the Google Sheet. So I'll quickly take you through this. So basically, this is a weekly budget. You see the planned spend is 2,500 Rand. I don't know why I'm using my finger. Okay, there. And then you can see it like I'm breaking down my spend into 3 categories, like food, transport, and like every other thing I do. Okay. And against that food, I'm going to say I can spend 1,500 Rand a week. That's the only one we're going to demo. So just ignore the rest, just to give you an idea. And then this bar here shows you how much money I have left against my budget. Okay. So next steps, we wrote some code. And here you can see that after transaction, the transaction object coming in there is the result from the card swipe. After you've done it, it connects to Google Sheets over here. And here we posted the Google Sheet. So you'll see the money on the right left there. We're going to put a 500 Rand transaction from a Spar in Cape Town, and we're going to hit that button. And magic. So suddenly, when I swipe my card, the data is actually going into a Google Sheet, and you can see that blue bar there actually showing the value. Okay, and just to show you the sheet, now you can see my budget over here has updated. I've spent 500 Rand. So I still have 1,000 Rand left. Simple. So we've now managed to, from swiping a card, post something into a cloud provider, in this case, Google Sheets. Okay, so next thing I want to do is notify myself against that like spend category. So once again, we're going to plug into this after transaction here. We're going to log it to that budget. Now what I do is actually read that spreadsheet, read the Google Sheet back information, so I can start doing some calculation in that after transaction method. And then what I want to do is I want to post it to Slack. So every time I swipe my card, I'm going to get a Slack message that you have X amount of money available to spend still. So once again, looking at the code, we just focus on the right-hand side here. You see the get remaining budgets. So we're actually calling out to Google Sheets, mapping it into an object. We built this integration into Slack, just simple little JavaScript. And at the bottom here, you can see we're sending the message, you have X amount of money left. Okay, so once again, we click it. You'll see my budget's gone down. And at the top corner there, you'll see there's a little thing that says you have 400 Rand left. So that's Slack telling us that we now have stuff. So what typically would take a bank a very long time to build, we've now like almost built in 2 days, just by using this very simple logic and giving people access to their account. But now the magic part comes. Like, can I actually start controlling my card behavior? To do that, we actually have to then look at this before transaction. Now, the before transaction happens, just to position it, before you actually, the money goes off your account. So this is where you get a chance to block stuff or do something before the money goes off. Just while we're on this topic, from a security point of view, like the first question somebody asked me is, can I use this stuff to like just make the card swipe go through without paying for it? That's obvious. It's like you just go, yes, accept everything, and you just swipe your card. That's not actually how it works. These functions go out before it goes through the normal card transaction processing. It runs in an AWS Lambda expression, and the only results that get returned back to the card system is a Boolean. It's like true or false, like do I proceed or don't I proceed? So you can't really manipulate anything that's out of the ordinary from your card processing flow. This is just something else you can do on the side. It's in a Lambda expression, out of our building, out of Investec's infrastructure. You can't really do dodgy stuff with it. Okay. So just to continue with this, we're going to read that budget into that before transaction. And then if the money isn't, if we don't have enough, if the card swipe coming in is bigger than the budget we have available, we're going to decline it. So now I can actually start controlling it. Okay, so you see there on the left-hand side, I've got 400 Rand available. And over here, we hit that simulator again. Well, before we hit the simulator, you can see that before transaction method coming in there. it takes this authorization object, which is basically the thing coming from the point of sale. So it's coming all the way through our systems, hitting this method. And now based on that object, you can actually start doing some logic. So you'll see, as I mentioned, this Boolean condition happening here. It's basically just saying, do I have enough money left to accept this card swipe? And based on that, it's returning a true or a false. So we hit the simulator, and at the bottom of this editor thing on the left, or the simulator, you'll see there's a console log that tells you what the result will be going back to the point of sale. And there in the red, you see we've actually just now declined it. So when you swipe the card will go, sorry, it's been declined. Okay, magic. Now, the freaky thing here is, from now on, I actually don't have to actually code anymore, because what I can do now is say, I want to set up this budget, and I can control the behavior of my card by changing the values in the Google Sheet, which is quite magical, because now I can say, I don't need to do anything. I can put up my budget, every month allocate myself stuff, and never code, and just go and control what the card can be used for. So that's very useful. If you think of this in a more business context, maybe you issue some cards to your driver or to your cleaner, you can now go and say, each card, how do I set up that budget and make sure that the things are being spent on just what you want to, and you can start dynamically be changing the behavior of it. This is just an example. We made that 2,500, ran that same run in sandbox button, and this time the result is coming back as true. So we've now just managed to alter the behavior of a card based on changes in a Google Doc or Google Sheet. So that was quite black magic-y. I made my magic wand, and I just made a Google Sheet, start manipulating Investec's card infrastructure through allowing access for developers to some parts of this transaction flow. Because it's in an AWS Lambda expression, you're not in the firewall, so nothing's blocking you, so you can use any of these other things to try and think about creative ways of using your own data to do stuff with. So this is, for me, the big opportunity. It's like we are building something that we don't know the potential of, and I think it's up to the community to start showing where the potential is in this thing. Like our role as the bank is to say, here's all the technology, and I think the community's role is to make value from that. So, as I mentioned, like this is still in a very early beta phase, and what we want to do here is not go away into a cave and build it and then come out and say, hey, look at our cute, cool technology. We want to say, we're building this for the community. So what we want to do is build it with the community. And I think that's the important point. If you bring it back to why I was waffling on about that, helping the tech ecosystem is the biggest impact to the economy, I believe this is the leverage we can pull to start actually generating economic wealth as a tech community. Because giving you access to your own services and products, you can start getting really creative how you want to use that stuff and building businesses or just building systems. So if you want to be part of this, we're starting a little community. OfferZen is helping us set that up. And at the bottom, you'll see the link, offerzen.com, community Investec. Go there, enroll to the beta program, and help us build out what this thing could be one day. Thank you.
A brief question, when's release date?
We're looking at Q1, but only for the closed beta community. It's just, so we're going to start small and just build it out a bit. So it'll be Q1 next year.
And public?
Well, it's to be confirmed. I think we want to just make sure it works before we start rolling it out to more people. Okay,
great,
so just join
idea.
that beta community and you'll be on the waiting list.
Do you anticipate that by doing this, you'll inspire the rest of the banking community to follow suit and open up their services to the public as well?
Sorry, I didn't get that whole question.
Do you anticipate that by doing this and opening up your services to the community, you will inspire other banks to follow suit and do the same?
I'm hoping it will inspire people to think about technology different, that it's that the banking functionality and accounts don't actually belong to the banks. They belong to the individuals and to the community, and the value we can unlock is in that community. So I'm not sure other banks will do the same thing. I can't talk on behalf of other banks. We have a very specific intent here, which is to help grow the developer. Other banks not that have the same intent. So, but I'm hoping, for me, this is a community thing. It's about making South Africa a better place, not necessarily about anything else.
Hi. Oh, sorry, a bit loud. Yeah.
Oh, there.
Yeah. So you've obviously been in this industry for quite a while, and I've been thinking about some of the challenges that larger organizations, corporations face. Like when you're a small startup, or a couple of guys, you can smash a few things out. Everyone trusts everyone, and you just like get the work done. But as it scales up, the agility and the velocity seems to drop down quite a bit. Do you have any suggestions on how one can minimize that velocity drop and how one can improve that flow?
I think fundamentally it's about understanding what you're good at and like partnering with people to help you doing the stuff that you're going to struggle with. So if you want to try and build a bank yourself, that would make no sense, for example, because like you could smash out a little prototype and say I've got a bank, but once you get into the regulated space, the whole thing will fall apart. So I think it's about understanding what you're trying to accomplish and where you could leverage partners to get that right. Because there's no point in building everything yourself.
Sure. I was really talking about like on the developer side, like across a team, when you have a larger team and you have more teams collaborating on a single product.
I think we had a similar journey in my team. We started with like a 5-man team, it grew to 100, and when we got to 100, the wheels sort of came off. Because like the culture and the pace you develop as a small team really starts to fall apart when you start to scale. And I think for us it was about just making sure that you constantly go back to, are you doing things like the basics really well and not just accelerating fast all the time. So it's almost like at some point you have to put the handbrake on, go back and saying, is the tech stack we have really, really good? And focusing on that instead of just focusing on more and more delivery, because you can get a bit caught in your own what they call it, navel gazing, by thinking your product's going well, but it's not really keeping up with like the scale that you're trying to get to. So I think it's just being really good at the basics of technology. Like, do you have a good release pipeline, for example? Or are you still deploying things by copying and pasting? So it's like basic things like that.
All right, thank you.
What role, if any, does open source play in this effort? Do you use any open source stuff? Will there any open source things be born out of this initiative?
I haven't thought that far yet. I'm hoping we'll definitely be using open source stuff. Whether we make some of this code open source, I'm not sure. I haven't actually thought it through. I can't really give you a real answer yet.
Sorry, just on the question that you were asking. So you guys have grown. I'm not sure how big your dev team is at the moment. But
it's about 100 people.
So 100 people. How are you structuring your teams, right? So are there many teams of 5, and how do you make those up? Or how have you kind of created that way of working within such a big team of devs?
So like we from an early age, we sort of went with cross-functional teams. We follow the Amazon single pizza team thing. So we have teams about 5 to 8 people generally, made up of a BA, product owner, and devs, and they work together to get stuff out. And then we just break the work up into those mini teams. I think once you go bigger than 8 people, the communication starts to get a bit wobbly. I know some people think there's devs in a pool, BAs in a pool, and you like suck it out for projects. We found that like sort of disempowers the devs and the BAs because they don't really own the thing. So we try to like make it that if you're working on something, you're like stuck in it for a while and you're part of an 8-man team. Does that sort of answer it?
So that thing with the lambdas is really interesting, but for it to benefit people that aren't programmers, right? Is there any future vision for having some kind of like vetted marketplace where developers can contribute these kinds of scripts and normal users can install them into their own account to kind of, but it needs to be vetted because it's their money, right? And they're not programmers, so they could read the code, but they're never going to be sure that it's not like secretly sending data to a second Google sheet where I now know what people are buying.
Yeah. I think the plan is to sort of get to sort of a GitHub repository of code at some point where we can start, where there's a vetted level of code in there and people can start sharing that code. Whether we monetize or not, that's not really up to me. For me, it's about giving everybody access to the tools to use to get that right. But there's definitely the intent to start helping Like, there's no point in having code that's just locked down to yourself. We want to create a mechanism that you can start sharing code. Like, if you have a great use for your card or whatever and you want to send it to your friend, there must be a way of getting the code to them, like without sending emails with code snippets. That makes no sense, really. So I think that will evolve over time, just because it's the natural way of it will evolve, not because of intent to some. Does it make sense? Like, with the vetting of the code is a bit strange, because like, the code actually belongs to the community. So, and there's two ways to approach it. You can either vet the code or make sure that the infrastructure it runs on is solid and there's no holes from a security point of view. So I'm not sure which angle to follow yet, but we'll work that out with the help of everybody.
What is the state of bank APIs internationally? Are there some patterns or examples that we can follow that's been established in other countries?
Yeah, so I can just talk from Investec's context. So Investec has another leg of the bank in UK, and that falls under PSD2, which is the UK legislation. They sort of force everybody to expose open APIs to third parties that are vetted by that governing body. So we've built an open API for the sake of facilitating a regulatory requirement, but a lot of banks are treating it as a compliance thing. Like, they're going, I'm just ticking the box because the regulator says so. I think our approach is more to say, can we use that technology to create value in the system? So from a maturity point of view, like, I think beginning of this year, all EU banks needed to expose their APIs, so including us. South Africa, there's no legislation yet, so it's sort of open for discussion still, but I think getting there quicker is probably more beneficial from the opportunity side than waiting for somebody to tell you to expose your API. Does that answer your question?
Hello.
Hi.
My question is rather, this came about because you did an investigation to find the best way to provide something back to the community. And I think you mentioned that you started investigating whether you can do something in education, looking at young people and stuff like that. Is there something that Investec, that you guys are doing with regards to young people, or is there something that you look to do or something?
So we're doing a lot already, but it's not cohesively tied into this picture. So, for example, we run a grad program for developers. We have bursaries thing where we sponsor developers. We run Pro Maths, which is like one of the most successful maths or STEM type of building up systems. I think historically the approach from just getting the mathematics part right, I think it's starting to become more apparent that that's contributing value into the tech ecosystem. We can use those things to actually start bolstering, like a feeder system where we get young people into the economy and we give them tools to do stuff with. That's probably the magic mix. For me, it's all about the cradle to grave strategy. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.